Welcome back to our workshop. I've just finished rescuing this antique French settee. Someone had previously repaired it and unfortunately it broke. So I was able to repair it and put it back together again and hopefully get another 100 or 200 years out of this piece of furniture. Now my next piece that I'm going to work on today is this chair here. It's almost 150 years old. It's very unique. It's been broken off at the front. Again, this is something that someone else repaired previously and that repair failed. So this is another rescue I've got coming ahead that I'm going to walk you through step by step. Now the chair repair is going to take a number of different skills. Furniture restoration skills, woodworking skills, chair making skills, and wood turning skills, as well as wood finishing skills. So there's a lot involved in this repair, and I hope you're going to enjoy this video. The other thing I'm really excited about is I have an invention I've been working on for several years. It's now in patent pending status, so I can share it publicly and my intellectual property is protected. So I'm going to share that invention with you for the very first time in video today. You'll see that as I work through this project.
As a furniture repair business, we're opening the doors to our workshop to show you the tools and techniques to repair furniture.
What I need to do is take that apart, repair it, and put it back together so I can get this chair in working order.
We give you tips to make your repair projects easier. Let's get into the workshop and start fixing furniture.
This chair is really unique for a number of reasons. The first one is it's got a perforated plywood seat. Plywood was a technology that was developed in the 1800s, and this chair has a date stamped on the back of it, July 1876, and it's a race patent. So it's a patent date. Another thing that makes this chair unique is the curve on the back here. You can see here, this is a gentle curve, but there's also a bit of a sweeping curve here as well. So when this was being manufactured, it was bent. And there's an extreme bend. If I flip this over this way, you can see this piece right here. This is all one continuous piece of wood. So just imagine trying to bend a piece of wood like that. So some great craftsmanship in this. Another part of the bending here was the legs. These are turned parts, and you can see here what that profile looks like, but when you look at it this way, they would have been turned and then bent. So a lot of bending to get to a chair like this. I found a chair very similar to this in a catalog. I did some research and found an old catalog from Gardner & Company. This is out of New York City, and they have patented a 3-ply perforated veneer chair seat. And the protection they've got on this patent dates back to 1872, so a little bit earlier than the chair I'm working on. It's interesting to see how close the design of one of their chairs is to this one. The only difference I can see is a handle in the crest rail at the back and one extra stretcher. I found it interesting in this catalog there was a statement about badly made furniture is a poor investment. It's as true 100 years ago as it is today. I talked to the customer about the history of this piece, and they bought it at a local antique dealer here in the 1970s, so they don't really have a lot of history. Now, because of the uniqueness of this chair and the fact that they have 3 other chairs like this, it's a valuable set. So I need to treat this as an antique because it does have value and do my work in a way that preserves the value of the chair. Now I'm going to walk you through the various parts that are broken off here, and when the customer brought this chair in, they did the right thing, and that is they brought all the pieces. So Lori put these in a bag when the customer came in, and I know where those pieces go, but unfortunately because of the previous repair I can't just glue this back together again. I've got to make some new parts. The upper part of the chair here is in good condition, as is the seat, but the front rail here, you can see this has been broken off. So I've got 2 dowels on this end, and they'll go in holes right there, so that will go back together again. But over here, you can see this wood's broken out. So this part connects here, and you can see that someone's put a screw in. There's a split here. There's also a crack here and a couple more screws. So this had previously been repaired, but over here, this isn't wood. I'll flip it over, and you can see on the top, we've got wood grain all through here, and then it's really smooth. There's no grain pattern there at all. And what that is wood filler. Someone put some wood filler in there, but where it connected here, wood filler is not an adhesive, so really there was no strength here at all. No wonder this broke. What I'm going to have to do is replace this whole piece with a new one. Now there are some stretchers here that have broken off. You can see there's a dowel here that someone put on, but unfortunately there's not much strength when you repair something like this. When you core out the center of a dowel, really the only strength is that little tiny bit all the way around, and it's very susceptible to breaking. So not a good repair technique. Also, I noticed in here, this has got wood filler all around it. So this dowel pin is just pulling right out. I've got two stretchers here that are broken. There's one over here that's split, so it needs to be replaced. And I'm not sure about the fourth one, but I need to take all of these pieces apart, make sure I've got good strong connections when I get it all back together again. So I'll roll out some padding here and we'll take the chair apart. The first thing I need to do is label the parts, and I like to put the chair here so the back is down the front of the bench. So I'm going to put this as front 1 and front 2. The reason I label these on the top is because there's typically wear marks where people put their feet on these, so I want the wear marks in the original spots. And this would be my left front, this would be my right front, and this way I can get everything back together again the way it originally went. So that's loose. This is sort of loose. Not quite. This is where spreader clamps come in. So this is a trigger clamp, and what you do is take off the one end, put it on the other, and then you've got something that you can spread things apart. You can take a lot of shoulder muscles to do this work, so this just saves some work on your body. It's ergonomically easier to do. So there you go. I'll get this piece out of the way and then I'll see if these will disconnect. When you've got old furniture, the glue can break down with the movement in the chair. So it's important to check out all the joints to make sure. Oh yeah, you see, these came apart really easily. This one is got a bit of movement, so does that one. Now, when you've got a connection like this where you've got nothing to pry them apart, that's where I put these in the vise. So what I'll do is put this in the vise. I've got pine on either side of this vise, so it's really soft wood, and I'll clamp it in. It's nice and tight. And then what I'll do is take a rubber mallet, and I need to be careful because if I just hit it out here, I could end up snapping that piece off. So I want to hit it right here as close as I can and try and keep that parallel as I loosen it up. Just like that. I'll set these to the back of the bench and then we can work on these stretchers. So see if these have any movement. Yeah, there's a little bit. There we go, there's one. Now this one has a split in it, so I have to be careful. I want to see if I can get this all out in one piece because I need it for measurements to measure the length for the replacement. No, it's not moving. So I'll pull up my secret weapon here. This is just household vinegar. And we'll see if we can get that glue to break down. The protein in the glue will break down with the acid in the vinegar. So I'll put this all around, let it soak in a little bit, and hopefully that'll just pull apart. Sometimes you need to scrape off a little bit of finish around the inside here, but when you put the vinegar in, it should soak into the joint instead of running down the side. I've applied vinegar here a few times, and if I twist this to the left, you can see how the split opens up. So I'll twist it to the right. And I can see a little bit of vinegar squishing out there, but it doesn't want to rotate. So I'm going to try the mallet. So I'm going to hold it here and just give it a couple gentle taps and see if I can jar it loose. I think it's coming a little bit. Maybe not. No, it's really in there. Maybe a little more force. No luck. There seems to be some soft adhesive in the edges here, so I'll clear that out and apply more vinegar, and hopefully that'll help. This still isn't moving, so my last resort is a heat gun. I generally don't like using these because you can end up scorching the wood. So I'll set a timer here and just make sure I don't overdo it. This joint is not coming apart. It's either been glued with epoxy or maybe a PVA that was glued really well. So to deal with the split, I've got two choices. Cut this off, drill that out, and replace the stretcher. Or glue this split. Now this split is about 4 inches long, and it goes about halfway in here. It doesn't come out the other side. So if I can get glue in that whole surface in there and clamp this shut, that will be stronger than the wood fibers itself. So that's the approach I'm going to use to repair this piece. I've got superfine tips for syringes, so that'll allow me to get glue deep in the crack. I'm going to use a dark PVA glue for a permanent bond. Now I want to pull this open so I can get glue in that split, so I'll put a clamp on here. Now that's not going to want to stay, so I'll put this up here. Looks like I need something here as well. This is one of the reasons they joke you can never have too many clamps. Okay, so now as I tighten this up, the split opens. So now as I put pressure on that glue, it moves up here and out the tip, and you can see how fine that is. So that allows me to get inside this crack right into the middle. I'll attack it from both sides, load up that full joint, and then this will be a nice strong connection between these two pieces of wood. Once I get to the larger area of the crack, it's really painful to have to use such a small tip here. So I'll take that one off, put a larger tip on, and the glue flow is much faster now to be able to do the rest of it. Now you will end up with a drip like this, but once you release the clamps, and squeeze that a little bit, you see how that glue is squeezing out? It's telling me I've got enough glue in the joint. That's perfect. The syringe and larger tips clean up with soap and water. The smaller tips I haven't had that much luck with, so I typically throw those out. I'll clean these up and then I'll come back and take this apart.
Please give us a thumbs up so more people will see our videos.
Okay, so for this part here, it looks like it's loose. It's already broken, but I want to keep all of this in one piece if I can, because I want to be able to put that together with the other piece. Let's just see if this will come off. Okay, it's a little bit stubborn. I use wedges on the back of my bench that I can put in here, and I'm hitting the dowel. And what that allows me to do is I can now put pressure on this end and it forces this end up. Put another dowel wedge in this side. And what I'll do is just work these two to pop it out. What I'm trying to do is just make sure I don't damage the piece I'm keeping here as I'm pulling this apart. Looks like the seat came off. For some reason, that's really stubborn. Now that I have this piece separated, I'm going to reattach it here, and that will tell me what the pattern of this new piece should be. So I'll get that glued up, and then we'll start on the turnings for these stretchers. When I put these two pieces together, you can see this is where the wood filler is, so there wasn't any hole there, and there's a fair bit of splintering. I now realize why this extra piece of wood was given to me. So I'll just lather this up with glue. I can be as sloppy as I want to be, because it doesn't really matter how this goes together. As long as the pieces fit tight, then I'll be happy. So again, I'm just doing this because it's going to allow me to make a template out of this piece. Let's see, where does that go? Right there. Get these pieces wedged together. It goes together a bit like a puzzle. There. Lather some more glue on here. I'm going to put a bit on here. I don't think it's going to hold, but I'll try it anyway. Let's see how it fits. Not bad. The key part is up here. It's sticking out a little bit, so when I clamp this up, I'll just make sure I tap that in, get the grain seated. That's all clamped up, so I can put the glue away. And these stretchers, I have two that are the similar length, so they're the ones that are closer together at the front, and I've got one that's got tenons on both ends. So I know the length of that one, but this one, I couldn't pull that one apart, and this one's been damaged, so I do need to measure that one, and then we'll have the measurements for how long these need to be. So we've got 13 inches to this part here, and then 3/4 of an inch for the tenon. So I'll need to add 3/4 of an inch on the other end for the other tenon. Now if we take a close look at the wood here, you can see this isn't oak, this is birch. This is what oak looks like up close. You've got a very open grain pattern. So I'm going to find some birch, we'll make up some blanks, and we'll turn them on a lathe. I like to keep my workshop clean and safe, and that means dust collection is an important part of my work practices. You can see this dust collection hood here I've created. It pulls that dust away from me, the operator, and really controls the mess in my workshop. If you're interested in plans for this, I've got them on my website, wouldn'titbenice.ca. With this block of wood, you might think the next step is to slice off pieces here so we can do these turnings, but that's actually a mistake. That was a mistake that was made on this piece when it was made. You see how this broke off? And there's an angle that goes across there? It's because the grain of the wood is going across this piece, so it makes it very weak. It needs to be running parallel. So what I'm going to do next is actually split off pieces of wood here, and that way I know that my pieces are running with the grain, and I'm not going to end up making a stretcher that has a weak point like that. So you can see here the splitting, the way it's happening. The grain isn't straight on this. So I'll continue splitting this out until I can get it down to the point where I've got parallel grain with the pieces that I'm splitting out. So you can see where that natural split is happening, just following the grain. And if I had cut off a piece that was parallel, I would have been repeating the mistake that you see here. See how that almost lines up? Now that I can see the direction of the grain, what I'll do is cut out parts parallel to the grain to make sure I've got straight grain pieces. On the base of my bandsaw, I've also built in dust collection. This is just a hose attachment where I put the shop vac in and it pulls the dust right from the cutting surface. Now that I've got a split here, what I can do is draw some parallel lines, and those would be my cutting lines for making sure I've got straight boards. So what I'm going to do is just cut them into 1-inch strips. And then we'll be good to go. With these pieces cut, now what I'm going to do is rotate them and do the same thing. You can see the angle of the grain is here. So what I need to do is find a 1-inch strip where I get that straight, and then I'll have a 1-inch by 1-inch blank. I've cut these square on the miter saw, and now I'll just go around and mark them for center. It's important to go all the way around them because they're not perfectly square pieces. So right in the center of that square is where my center is. As I turn these parts on the lathe, I'm going to give you a little bit of a glimpse into an invention I've been working on for the past 3 years. I've shown you the dust collection solution I've developed for my miter saw and my bandsaw. Dust collection is really important because wood dust can cause permanent lung damage, and that lung damage will permanently reduce your breathing capacity. Now, dust collection for a lathe is extremely difficult because there's debris flying everywhere and it makes a mess of your workshop. That's been impossible to tame until now. I'm inviting you to join me on a new YouTube channel called Clean Lathe, where I'm documenting the process of going from an invention to getting a product on the shelf. This is something that I'm really excited and passionate about, and I hope you'll join us on that adventure. I'll leave the link up here on the screen to the YouTube channel, and if you don't see it here, expand that section at the bottom of the video here into the description, and I'll put the link there. Now, let's get to turning. So I've roughed this out to round. Let's take a look at what dust and debris is left on the lathe. There's just a few chips on the bedways, some on the black mat, but there's practically nothing on the floor. That's why I think this is such a great invention. I got a little too excited though when I forgot to take dimensions for the pieces I need to turn, so I'll do that now. But if you're not familiar with turning and how messy it can be, I'm going to save one of these and turn it at the end without any dust collection, and you'll see what I mean by it makes a real mess. I've got the caliper set. This one's for the diameter of the stretcher, and then this one here is for the diameter of the tenon, so I'm all set to go. I can take this off now. The last thing I need to do is just cut off the end, and that replacement stretcher is done. I use a bench hook when trimming these off. It's just a simple board with a lip on the front here and a lip on the back. And what happens is you put your workpiece on it, and you're just going to push against it, and that holds everything nice and square so you can run a saw on here. I use a Western saw because it cuts on a push, so it's important to put your finger up here to control the saw, and then it's just a matter of holding everything in place and running the saw. Just like that. I'm just going to get all the surfaces cleaned off here and get them ready for the final turning without dust collection. I'm now going to turn the last stretcher without a dust collector and see how dusty this is. Now typically when you're turning, you wear a smock like this. It's got a very tight collar on it, and that way the shavings just shed off of you. You can take it off and then you're relatively dust free. But I'm going to wear just a cotton shirt here just to show you how messy this can be. So I brought this down to round, and you can see I've got some wood chips on me, and over here there's dust and debris, not just on the lathe, but also on the floor. I'll finish turning the stretcher and clean up, and then we can test them out. Okay, this turning is now done, and you can see there's a fair bit of dust there. There's a lot of dust in the air right now, so I'm going to put on my respirator again. I'm going to clean all this up, and then I'm done my work for the day. I'm going to let all the dust settle in here. Dust in a workshop, the fine dust that damages your lungs, can hang in the air for up to 30 minutes. So you really have to pay attention to that fine dust particulate that you can't even see, but it will damage your lungs. I'm not going to test out these parts, but I'll show you just on top of the surface here, there's a fine coating of dust. And that's just from that last turning where I didn't have the dust collection on. There's the dust. So very fine, but you can see the difference here between where I dust it and where it's not dusted. Let's try to fit these parts together. There's one there, and that would fit if the glue were cleared out of it. And here I've got a dowel that I need to pull out. You can see here the wood filler that was put in there, so I'll just drill it out progressively with a couple different sized drill bits. Now I want to be careful that I'm not damaging the inside of that hole there. So because it was off-centered, I'm actually going to have to chip that out with a chisel. If I don't do this with a chisel, what I'll end up doing is wearing this side of the chair more, and I'll be changing the position of the hole. There, that's what I wanted. You see how that filler's just breaking out? That way I preserve the original shape and the direction of the mortise. On this lower mortise, you can see all that glue in there. I'll use a Forstner bit to drill that out. I use a Forstner bit because it's flat at the bottom, and that'll get me right to the bottom of the hole. Okay, we'll give it a shot now. That fits well there. Okay, that's seated well there. Okay, that's good. I can try this and see how it fits. Okay, that's good. And this one, oh, I have to clean out this mortise and this out as well. I'll get that cleaned up and then we'll dry fit this. With the mortise cleaned out, I'll set that aside, and before I dry fit these parts, I'm just going to clean off the glue residue. And I'll bring this closer so you can see what the glue residue looks like. So as I turn this, you'll see there's some wood here, there's a bit of glue residue in there, there's more residue here. That needs to be taken off because old glue and new glue, they won't stick together unless it's hide glue, and this doesn't look like hide glue. The fastest way to clean off the glue is just with a file. Now, if you're new to this, I suggest using sandpaper because a file works very fast and you could end up creating loose parts if you're not careful. These together. There we go. Okay. These two here are a little bit too loose. So I'm just going to have to wrap those with shaving when I assemble those, glue them together, and that way they'll be nice and tight on the hold well. Okay, so the next part, I need to replace this part up here. Let me get my glued up part and we'll size it to fit. I just want to make sure that fit because what I'm going to do is use this part here as the template to make the reproduced part. Okay, so it's got 4 holes here for dowels, 2 holes here for the legs, and then that curved part, it's about 1 inch thick, white oak. It's time to get out the planer. I've got the board to the right thickness now, and you can see there's an angle on the wood grain this way, but it sort of straightens out this way, so I'm going to use this end here. Now I still have a rough edge here, so what I need to do is dress that edge. I don't own a power joiner, I'm going to do it by hand. All I do is I put it in the vise, and for a little extra support, I put this here, clamp it down, and then reach for my number 7 plane, which is known as a jointer. I can now line up my board here, and it's on a bit of an angle here. The angle of the grain is more severe than it is over here, so I'm going to stick to this side. I've got planer snipe here, which means there's a bit of a scoop here and a bit here, so I'm just going to line it up in the middle. Now when making parts, the first thing you want to do is cut the joinery and then cut the shape. So I will clamp this on here and then mark where I need to drill the holes for the dowels, and then I'll trace out the shape after I've done that. I'm going to put this back in the vise, and this is the advantage of working the joinery first, because I've got a square board to work with, much easier to work with. And now what I can do is set my square and mark the center of the dowel locations. So I'm going to put one there, another one here. Now to drill these holes for the dowel pins, I'm going to be using brad point bits, and they're different than standard drill bits. A standard drill bit is referred to as a twist bit, and I'll give you a close-up of these. Here you can see on the brad point there's a steep point on this, and it's got cutting edges, so it makes a nice clean entry, but that point makes sure that the hole gets drilled in the straight direction. The twist bit can sometimes follow the grain pattern and might get you off the target in terms of where you want. So for better accuracy, brad point bits are the best tool. Now these dowels are a very odd size, so I'm just taking my drill bit and put it in the mortise here, just to make sure I've got the right size. The last measurement I need is to get it in the center, and to do that, I'm going to take these clamps off, and just use a marking gauge. What I do is eyeball the center, and then put one mark on this side, the exact same mark on this side, and then between those two marks is my center. I'll use an awl to accurately start that hole, and then we're good to go. So I had to switch over to my Makita corded drill. Sometimes the battery power just dies out, so bad timing on that, but a corded drill is always good to have on hand because it does have power all the time. The next step here is to take out the dowel pins, and the tool I use for that are fencing pliers. They've got a really good grip around a dowel and don't damage it very much as you try to pull it out. So on older furniture like this, they typically will just pull out. If you're using something like a regular pair of pliers, you might end up crushing the wood fibers in the dowel pin, so not a good idea. I'll pull these off, I'll clean off the old glue, and then we'll give this new board a test fit. As I'm putting this dowel pin in, it's really loose, and what I see is there's a split down the side here, so that's something else I'm going to have to address. So let's give this a try. That's not working. I wonder if it's that loose pin. It's just out of position. I can see that crack had opened up. So I'll try putting it in this side first. Okay, so it's a little bit proud on the top, meaning it's sticking over a little bit, which is fine because I can plane that down. So we've got a fit. We're good to move on to the next stage, and that's cutting out the shape here. Okay, so we've got everything set here that I can now line up the holes on the existing part, trace it out, and then cut out the bandsaw. My bandsaw is running a little bit on an angle, so I need some tune-up work there, and then we'll be good to cut this. I've got the bandsaw pulled apart here, and I think part of the problem might be where the teeth are running on the bandsaw tire. So let me just focus this in on here, and I'll show you what I mean. So I've got this running so the gullet, that's the bottom of the teeth, is pretty much in the center of the tire. And I wonder if that's throwing off the angle of the blade. This is a new blade and I haven't worked with it before. So I'm going to push it back so the teeth are in the center of this tire and see if that adjusts the issue. The other thing I'm going to do is tighten up the tension, and hopefully I can cut a straight line with it. There. I hope that's a better setting. We'll see if that works. Well, I've got the machine apart. I'll show you my dust collection solution for the bandsaw here. This is just an accessory for a vacuum, and I blocked it up in a way here that I can screw this on and it goes underneath here and it picks up the dust on either side of the blade when it cuts. I just need to put the right tension on the blade here before I start. You can see here it's very loose, so we'll tighten it up and hopefully those two changes will make a difference. Okay, that's much more stiff, so that should be good to go. I call that a fail. It must be the teeth on the saw. They're worn on one side, so I've got to throw out this blade and try another one. Okay, we'll try this again. Well, that's a little bit better, but it's still not straight. I'm going to try tightening the tension. If that doesn't work, maybe it's time to upgrade this old Delta. I'm not sure how to fix the bandsaw drift. I've tried a few things, but if you've got some advice for me, I'd love to hear it. Now, one of the things about bandsaws is packing up the blades. I thought this was a damaged blade, but it actually isn't, so I need to hang on to it. There's a technique where you hold your hands opposite to each other, and then you're supposed to be able to twist them together. Oh, I did it the first time. It doesn't always work, but make sure you've got gloves on, and your hands just need to be opposite, and then twist it. And all I need to do now is put a tie wrap on, and then I can pack this away. I'm going to glue up this split here, and you can see how loose this dowel is, so that needs to be tightened up. And over here, this one is snug, so what I'll do is take my fencing pliers and put them on, get a nice gentle grip here, and then pull that out. Now, the easiest way to glue up a split like this, when you've got a mortise, is to put a screwdriver in and pull it open. So you can see here, this is opening up, but there's also a crack here, and I'll move a little bit. You see over there as well. So I've got my syringe loaded up here. I'll glue it up, clamp it, and we'll be good to go. Now, I've cut this slightly oversized, so what I want to do is mark the ends here so I can get a perfectly lined up joint. So I'll just put these in here, and now that this is glued up, I've got nice tight spots for these dowel pins. I'll just set up my sander here, and what I'm going to do is work to these lines here and to the lines around the front. I didn't quite cut to the line, and that way I can get a nice smooth finish on here and duplicate that part. Okay, now do a test fit and we'll see how this works. That's a nice flush fit there, and it's a little bit high here, but I can take care of that after. There's a profile that's just rounded here. I'll take care of that by hand once I get everything assembled. The inside here I didn't sand and it's a little bit rough. It's smooth here. No one's really going to see that, but I know that it's going to be a quality job. So I'll just shape it on the end of the belt sander here, and then what we'll do is turn this over and drill for the legs. Now there's no easy way to mark these holes. The best thing I can do is work from the known areas. So this is a measurement here that I know is exactly the same, and this point here is exactly the same. So what I'm going to do is get this lined up with the middle of that hole, and then put a mark across here, and then I'll do the same thing here. This end isn't square, but there's basically a little bit of a horn there. Line this up with the middle of the hole here, use that same horn here, and that'll give me the center of the hole. The leg is going in here, and if it's off just a slight little bit, that's not really going to matter. So this is a good way to get the measurement. So I'll put these parts in here. And then, how's this work? These parts go together here. And then they're going this way. And now, to get all these parts lined up. Oh, this is going to be fun to assemble. There we go. We've got a chair. Okay, so I've got some shaping to do along here just to make it all blend in together. There was a fair bit of wear on the front of this that rounded it. So I'm going to do that with the spoke shave, and we should be ready for a glue up. Repairing furniture is a lot of problem solving. So here, the problem I've got is once I put this back together again, I've got a spot that's high and a spot that's level. So that's almost flush there. This is a little bit higher than this, so I need to work that down. By clamping this onto the workbench, I now have a relatively stable place to plane this down. I might need to put a little bit more clamping on here, but I'll give it a try. Sharp tools are best. That's why honing my plane blade is important. So I've got a pretty good shine on there. This is honing compound that's on the strop. And then on this side, this is just leather that doesn't have the honing compound, and I just need to hold it at the right angle here and then draw it back. This process gets this blade razor sharp, and you'll see in a moment here why it's important to have it so sharp. It makes the work much easier. Once I've done that, just run it a couple times on the back here. And we get a nice sharp blade. So when I put my blade back in, what I do is back it right off, and that way I've got no blade coming out, and then just progressively extend it until I start to get just a bit of a shaving. So there's a shaving there. Okay, I'm barely getting a shaving, but I'm also getting some movement, so I need to strap something down over here to prevent this from moving. With this piece of plywood here, I now have something nice and firm to push against. So I can start working this down. So I'm just going to go by feel, and my plane blade has a little bit of a rounded edge right on the corner, so my ideal plane would be not to touch the existing piece here, just the piece that I'm working on. So I'm just barely getting shavings off of this, and move my plane blade forward just a little bit. Getting a little bit larger shavings. I don't know if it's getting closer yet. Okay, I'm just taking a little bit off. I'm going to increase how far that blade is cutting. Almost there, but you can see how thin these shavings are. So I'm just taking down a little bit at a time. get this out of the way here, and then I can finish shaping the front of the chair. So the front here needs a gentle round over. It's not something you can really use a router bit for. That could certainly start the process, but it's a profile that you just can't duplicate with a machine. So I'm going to use the vise here. I'll just get this stuff out of the way first. So if I take a close up here, you can see that profile is really not just a round over. It's got a gentle curve to it right across the front there. That's what I'm looking to reproduce, so I'm just going to do it by eye. When you use a spoke shave, you want to work downhill in the grain. If I were to try and cut this way, the blade would dig in. So I need to work from the center this way, and then from the center this way. Pause here, you can see the profile starting to take shape here. I still have a ways to go. I'm making some progress here, but I realized I made a mistake. I don't have any guidelines to tell me where to stop that round over. So I'm going to use a trick that Garrett Hackett uses. He's a great woodworker I enjoy watching. And just measuring a line here, I've got about a ½ inch in from the edge. I'm going to put a line all the way around here, and then I know exactly where I need to start and stop the curve. So here's what the profile looks like. Matches pretty well. The key thing is to test fit it in the chair. It's come together pretty well. Just need a little fine tuning on the end here, and I can sand this down, and we're ready for the finish. Okay, I'm all ready for the glue up here. What I'm going to do, there's a couple loose joints here, so I'm just going to wrap them with some thick shavings. These are poplar shavings that I've made, and I'll wrap them around once before putting the joint in. These front two joints here are loose because I think there was probably a lot of movement over time and they were wearing out. So that'll just tighten them up and we'll be ready to go. I've got to put my respirator on because there's still dust in the air here. So I'll glue this up and then we'll come back and work on the finish. The glue's dried up on this chair overnight, so I can now take the clamps off. The finishing process is two steps. One is stain to get the color right, and the second is the protective finish. And that protective finish, you really do need to test for on antiques to make sure you're using the same finish. If you're using a modern finish that has nothing to do with the older piece, you're really destroying the value of the piece. So it's important to test for it, and I'll show you how to do that. I've got a whole video on how to test finishes. I'm going to skip a few of the steps. The top coat here I think is a shellac, so I'm using denatured alcohol and I'm going to see if I can dissolve that finish. These steps have to happen in a specific sequence in order to work properly. So I'm just putting a bit of a dab on the top here, and I'm going to test both the piece that I repaired and replaced as well as the stretcher, because they might have different finishes on them. Okay, so I've got a dot on each of these, and we'll see what happens. So here you can see the drip came down, and it's not sticky at all. So let me try this. No, this isn't sticky at all either. So that tells me this isn't shellac. The next test is with lacquer thinner. Again, just put a drop on each of these and we'll see what happens to it. So we'll see. No, it's not becoming sticky. Oh, but it is actually taking a bit of the finish off. Let's see what's happening here. No, it's not really. There's a bit of something there. You can see where it took a bit of the finish off. And what I'm looking for is how the finish behaves with these different chemicals. I'm going to try it again here. And again right there. Just leave it a little bit longer. And you see here where there's this white trail? This is telling me the finish is getting dissolved. And here I've left it a little bit longer to see if it's getting sticky. And it's not getting sticky, but it's definitely dissolving the finish. You see how that's dull? So it's telling me that this is a lacquer finish. To find the right stain, I create a sample, and this is the white oak piece that I cut off. So here I've got 4 different colors: English chestnut, early American, special walnut, and dark walnut. We'll take a look at what these look like next to the chair. The color I'm looking at in the chair is very consistent except for this corner here. This is what is a huge piece of filler, and someone had toned this really dark, so I'm going to ignore that in my color matching. Here are the samples from the light to the dark, and you can see the dark is way too dark here. These medium ones here, they don't quite have that reddish orange color, whereas I'm starting to get that here. Let me show you on the back. So you can see here this is way too dark. This isn't quite getting the color that we need here, and this is getting much better. Let me show you here. The problem with this though is, you see the grain pattern here? It isn't dark enough like this one is. So what I've done is I've taken this and I've applied it, I've sanded through it, and then I've applied that same stain on, and you can see I'm getting much closer. But it's difficult to tell what the final product is going to look like unless you go through the whole process. So I'm going to put some lacquer on here, and we'll see what the end product looks like. With the lacquer on, you can see it brings a more rich color in there. So I think we're on the right track. I'll stain up the first piece. This is all dried now, and the next step is to clean off the surface. So what I want to do is take it back down to this blonde area. I'm using 220 here. It's going to take a while this way. I'm going to switch over to 120. And it'll happen faster. So with oak, because it's got such an open grain, what's happened is the stain is staying in the open grain, and I'm taking it off the surface. It's important to use a tack rag because it'll pick up the dust that your shop vac can't. It's a really sticky cheesecloth. It's got some resin impregnated in it, and the purpose of it is simply to clean off the dust and get it ready for your finish. Before I put the stain on, I'm putting on a NIOSH approved organic respirator. This is what's required to protect your lungs from the harsh chemicals of this oil-based stain. The stain is looking a little too red for me, so while the wood is still saturated, I can manipulate the stain. I'm adding some dark walnut, and that'll just tone it down and hopefully get me to the right color. I'm ready to spray the lacquer, but you can see it's very flammable. So this is something I'm going to do outside. I'm going to mask off the piece, but before I do, what I want to do is just wear it down the finish a little bit. So along here, I've got a very consistent color because of the stain, but that's not what you see here from the wear. So I'm just going to rub the areas here with a very fine piece of synthetic steel wool, and that just takes some of the coloring off of the edge and gives it more of an aged look. So the finish is all dried now, and you'll notice that when I spray, I use this handle on my spray cans. It's an inexpensive add-on that you can put on any can, and it gives you much greater control than just trying to use the fingertip on the spray nozzle. If you want to see this and the other tools that I use and recommend, there's a link in the video description below to an Amazon store, and you can see all that. Now, I'd like to ask for your help. I'm trying to get to 100,000 subscribers for this channel. I'm growing this community around furniture repairs and restoration. So the larger the community, the better. If I can get to that 100,000 goal by the end of 2022, I'm going to give you a workshop tour. You're going to see every nook and cranny of this workshop and see how I work in a one-car garage. So let's get on to the last couple steps here. You'll notice that this chair does have a bit of a rock to it. I need to level off the leg, and then we can put the seat on and take a look at the finished project. The first thing I'm going to do is take off the feet that the homeowner has put on these. You'll see that they're much too large for these legs. These are probably 2-inch pads and 1-inch diameter ends here. Now I'm going to set it up on my bench. Now my bench is perfectly level and true, so I know that this is a problem. So the parts that are rocking here and here are the shorter legs. Here and here are the longer legs. And what that means is I have to trim one of these two legs off. So this and this, they have nice decorative turn parts. This back here doesn't really have any defining dimension as to where it is. So I'm going to trim off the back leg here. If you see this distance under here, when I push the leg down and then it bounces back up, this is the amount that I need to cut off on the back leg. If you want to measure this distance, you can put something underneath there that's the right thickness, but I just eyeball it. I've done it enough that I usually get it right the first time. And on this, I'm going to use a Dozuki saw. This is a very fine Japanese saw. It's great for doing fine detail like this. What I do is I put the saw face here and just get a feel for what that angle is of the bottom of the leg, and then just step it back to the amount I want to cut off and follow that along. Okay, we'll give it a try. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to put new pads on the bottom of these, and there are different styles of pads that you can get. So I could probably do a whole video on these. Two examples I have, some beige pads with some screw-on caps on the bottom. They work pretty well. And these are adhesive pads, so just felt pads. And some people think that adhesive pads aren't that great because they keep wearing off, but the trick is you need to install them properly. The key is making sure that the bottom of the foot is perfectly clean. Right now there's a sticker on here still from the last foot. I need to take that off and get rid of the adhesive. Then I take a little bit of mineral spirits. Some people know this as Varsol. I think in the UK it's known as white spirits, and rub the bottom. If you've ever got stickers on anything, this stuff will take it off. So what this is doing is cleaning off the base and just making sure there's absolutely no impurities on that the adhesive on the padding is going to stick. If you've ever had furniture pads not stick, that's why. Now there could be one more reason why chair pads don't stick, and that would be either there's a finish or the end of the chair is polished. All you need to do is take some 120 sandpaper, rub that down, and that'll just rough up the surface so it gives that padding something to adhere to. This is the original pad that was on this, and A, it's the wrong color, but B, it's the wrong size. You want one that's the width of this diameter or smaller. So here you can see this is a 1 inch and it's slightly too large. I'll just turn it over so you can see the size a little better. Slightly too large. The 3/4 inch is a little bit smaller, and that's the size that I'm going to use. Being that dark and being a little bit smaller, that should visually disappear when it's sitting on a hardwood floor. The last step is putting the seat back on, and it goes on with tacks. Some of these tacks stayed in place here, so I'll use those to align them with the old holes and then put in the rest of the tacks. I'm going to wrap up this video by giving you some close-ups of the repaired chair, and I hope you've enjoyed some of the tips and techniques I've shared with you on how to rescue an antique chair like this and preserve the value of it. I'm really excited about an upcoming project. I picked up this antique table for only $30, and the main reason why is because the top really needs a lot of attention. So you'll see that in an upcoming video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and please share our channel with someone you know who would enjoy learning about furniture repair. Thanks for watching Fixing Furniture.